Money FM 89.3, best of breakfast. Mind your business, only on Money FM 89.3.
Thanks for joining us on The Breakfast Show. It's Audrey Seek here with you to help mind your business. And we're talking about one of my favorite things today, and that's sleep. We all need it, but let's be honest, many of us aren't getting nearly enough. Globally, 1 in 3 adults struggle with poor sleep. And here in Singapore, almost half of us say we don't get adequate rest. That's not just a health concern. It has huge implications for our productivity, healthcare costs, and even policy. After all, Singapore's healthcare spending is projected to nearly double by 2030. Yet one of the most overlooked levers in preventative care is right under our pillows, and that is sleep. Our guest today has dedicated his career to this frontier. Dr. Carlos Nunez is Chief Medical Officer at ResMed, a global leader in connected sleep and respiratory care. He's here to help us unpack the sleep economy, separate hype from reality, and explore how sleep could reshape healthcare and business at large. Dr. Nunez, good morning. How are you doing today?
Hi, Audrey. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's great to have you on all the way from San Diego, so we really appreciate your time here. So let's start broad, Dr. Nunez, and begin with the big picture. How would you describe the sleep health landscape today? Are we really seeing more people struggle with poor sleep than ever before?
So actually, I would say it in reverse. I think what we're seeing is people have been struggling with their sleep for decades. As we've gotten to a much more technologically advanced world, a much more connected world, just the modern world, for decades, we've worn poor sleep almost like a badge of honor, as opposed to diet and exercise. When we think of human health, there are 3 pillars of human health: diet, exercise, and sleep. And we've always, pardon the phrase, but almost fetishized diet and exercise. It's the latest trend, the latest fad. Let me do this, let me do that. But it's okay to brag about, oh, I can live on 5 hours of sleep. I do just fine.
Yeah. I think we're all guilty of this. And specifically for Singapore, we know that our healthcare costs are already climbing pretty fast. And we're also dealing with an aging population here. So how does poor sleep add to the stress on the system?
So as you mentioned, Singapore is unique in Asia and in the world in having some of the highest levels of people reporting that they are not sleeping enough. And there are probably lots of different reasons. But the reason why it's most important to prioritize good, healthy sleep is the long-term consequences for health. You mentioned Singapore's healthcare spending looks to double in the coming years. We also know that Singapore has an aging population. We also know that Singapore also has a slowing birth rate. And so together, these things mean that there's this large aging population that will be dealing with chronic conditions, non-communicable diseases like hypertension, cardiovascular disease, metabolic problems like type 2 diabetes, even obesity. And we know that poor sleep increases the risk for all of those things. And probably even potentially more important, because the kind of care can be very expensive. It's memory care and care for dementia and Alzheimer's. We are also uncovering the scientific links between poor sleep leading to increased risk for dementia and Alzheimer's later in life. So it's extremely important. I heard earlier on the show you talking about, is there some, is the magic number? Is it based on science? Is it based on how the person feels? It's a little bit of both. I mean, effective sleep for a person is obviously getting good restorative sleep that helps you feel better. But there is some science. For most people, it's between 7 and 8 hours.
Okay.
Younger people tend to need more.
Yeah, 7 to 8 hours. I don't think many people get that, especially in this day and age, digitally speaking, we're so connected and, we're all guilty of having the phone right in our faces right until we go to bed. So let's clarify here. What does good sleep actually look like? I talked about the stats that I've gotten from my Oura Ring, about an hour to an hour and a half of deep sleep every night. Is that good? Is that bad?
So when I heard you talking about your Oura Ring, and by the way, I wear one as well, it's actually a very good device. It is a consumer-grade device, so just to keep in mind, many of these wearables are, but they do have some good clinical validation. And I will say for the Oura Ring and what you looked at, it does a pretty good job of calculating how long you've slept and certain of the sleep stages. It does a really good job. What's most important, and I heard this as part of the conversation, you do have to pass through all of these different stages. And most people will pass through them in cycles where they'll move from light to deep to REM sleep in different order, but they will cycle through over and over and go through multiple cycles a night. On your Oura Ring, you'll see those little bars.
Yep.
Again, it's all relative to the total length that you slept. You had only 5 hours and I forgot how many minutes of sleep. So I think all your bars are going to probably be a little lower, but the goal is to get the right balance of the different stages because your body needs all of them. Different parts of your body and your brain recover from all the work that you did the day before. But most important, you also mentioned things like staring at our phones that are keeping us awake. That's important. You need to have a good environment. You want to go to sleep around the same time every day, wake up around the same time every day. Stop looking at screens at least an hour before you go to sleep because the light from those screens is activating your brain to want to stay awake.
Yeah.
And probably most important, if you think you may have a sleeping disorder, something like insomnia or sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome, which are very common, talk to your doctor. There may be other reasons that are keeping you from sleeping.
Yeah.
I mentioned sleep apnea. In the world, 1 out of every 8 people, 1 billion people have sleep apnea. In Singapore, it's higher. It's closer to 1 out of every 7 Singaporeans have sleep apnea. And Singapore is not a society known for obesity. That's a misconception. Sleep apnea happens in babies, in children, in people who are not obese. As a matter of fact, most people with sleep apnea are not obese. So it's important to understand you have to get good sleep. There's good ways to incentivize a normal person to have good sleep. But there are also people who may have sleep conditions that are important to identify. So talk to your doctor about any sleep questions.
Yeah, you're doing a great job in helping us bust some myths today. And we talked about the Oura Ring, and, we have seen a lot of these health trackers really come up in the market. I want to talk about hype versus science, cutting through all of the noise. If not gimmicks, what are the real breakthroughs happening in sleep science and treatment today?
I think some of the biggest breakthroughs are that these consumer-grade wearables, number one, are taking the time to do the clinical validation that will allow them to have that credibility in the marketplace. I just came last week from Singapore, from the World Sleep Congress, and a very, very important part of what was being discussed at many of the scientific sessions were wearables. And so look for wearables that have some sort of clinical validation. As I mentioned, Oura, but also Apple and Samsung have done a lot. They've done a lot of clinical research. They've gotten features like sleep apnea detection and the way they monitor sleep clinically validated. And even the sleep apnea detection for Apple and Samsung is approved by the FDA and other regulatory authorities. So there's been a lot of advancements from the consumer side. From the medical side, we talked about sleep apnea before. The company that I work for, ResMed, one of the things we do is provide therapy for obstructive sleep apnea, CPAP devices and the masks that go with them. Those devices have advanced. They're smaller, they're quieter, but most importantly, they're connected to the cloud. So your doctor can see how you're doing, and more importantly, you can see how you're doing. So, average adherence to medication therapy or to medical therapy is about 50%. But if you have a connected device for your sleep apnea, adherence to that therapy jumps up to over 70%. And if you download an app to see how you're doing, your adherence to therapy jumps to 85% or greater even. So when you think of Singapore's healthcare expenditures and wanting to drive down costs, something as simple as treating sleep apnea, 1 in 7 Singaporeans can help later down the road avoid those costs from those risks. And these modern connected devices are more comfortable and more effective than ever.
Yeah, okay. So we know that the wearables have gotten a stamp of approval and these CPAP machines. Let's talk about ResMed itself. For those who may not be as familiar with you guys, can you share what ResMed does and how it sits at the crossroads, of healthcare, technology, and patient care?
Yeah, ResMed is an amazing story. It is one of the few, maybe the only medical device, sort of traditional medical device manufacturer that's made it's sort of a 2-step pivot from med device to med tech to really a true health tech and digital health company. And I alluded to the reason why. We don't just make devices. We make connected devices that allow the data that is driving the information economy and that is driving things like machine learning and AI and delivers it to the hand of the provider and to the hand of the patient. And we've been doing this for over a decade, even before it was cool. So we deliver solutions for sleep health, breathing health, and health tech in the home. Our biggest business is CPAPs and sleep apnea, but we also make ventilators that are used in the home, ventilators that can be used for life support, as well as industry-leading software platforms that not only connect all of that, but deliver residential care software solutions that drive things like the distributor industry in the United States or help with home-based healthcare in countries around the world.
Okay, so using AI, connectivity, and real-time data to personalize care for patients. Let's talk about the business of sleep, Dr. Nunez. In terms of demand, where are you guys seeing the strongest growth? Established markets like the U.S. and Europe maybe, or emerging regions like Asia?
So the growth is in pockets all over because I believe, as I mentioned before, sleep is truly having a moment. It's also driven by two other things. One, I mentioned, big tech getting into things like sleep apnea detection and sleep tracking is having more people talk to their doctors about their sleep conditions and uncovering more sleep disorders. So even though sleep apnea, I mentioned 1 billion people have sleep apnea, more than 90%, depending on where you are in the world, are undiagnosed and untreated. But your Apple Watch tells you when you wake up one day, hey, you may have sleep apnea. You ask your doctor. And now these patients are starting to come out of the shadows. The other big moment is the GLP-1 medications that everybody's talking about and the ability to better manage your weight. We talked about obesity. There is a minority of patients who have obesity and sleep apnea together. And so those who have struggled with their weight and where GLP-1s are appropriate, it helps them manage not only their obesity, but manage their sleep apnea. And so something like CPAP and a GLP-1 are better together because, as I mentioned, it's always been a part of the management of obstructive sleep apnea to manage your weight when obesity is a contributing factor.
Yeah, and sleep as preventative health care is a big thing as well. Do you think more of us should be doing sleep tests, especially those who maybe don't have wearables or can afford one of those? Is it worth, going for a sleep test from time to time and to understand the differences between, sleep apnea and snoring and insomnia and all of these different issues?
Yeah, it wouldn't be cost effective for any healthcare system to just give everyone a sleep test. What you would want to really do is, as I mentioned, talk to your doctor about your sleep. If it's the most important part of human health, I mentioned sleep and diet and exercise are those 3 pillars of health. If we truly believe that sleep is the most important, it should be one of the very first things you talk to your doctor about. Yeah. I use these letters to remember, and it's quality, time, and schedule, QTS. Very simple to remember. How are you sleeping? What's the quality? How many hours per day? What's the time? And the schedule. Is it every day that you're getting good sleep or not? If you start with those basics, then your doctor can decide if you're appropriate for a sleep test. Talk about snoring. Talk about if you have someone that shares your home or shares your bed, do they ever report that it sounds like you stop breathing? Those things are all really, really important and would make a difference when you talk to your doctor as to determine whether you need a sleep test or not. And then sleep tests now don't mean you have to spend the night in the hospital. Yep. You can do a home sleep test. In fact, one of ResMed's devices is called the Night Owl. We just released it recently. It sits on the end of your finger. You wear it at home for a couple of nights, and then you throw it away. All the data gets beamed to your doctor, and the results come back to you in days, not having to wait for an appointment to spend the night in the hospital.
Okay, QTS, that's something I will remember. And I have to ask you this age-old question. Catching up on sleep, is that something that actually exists? If you don't get a good night's sleep, we all have good nights, bad nights. Can you make up for it? A nap later or longer sleep on the weekend?
So you don't really make up for it. It is important if you do have a bad night's sleep for whatever reason, insomnia, jet lag, distractions, you should prioritize your sleep the very next night and try and get a good night. If you add a few extra hours, it actually doesn't get good. You don't go back in time and tack it on and say, oh, now you fixed from 2 nights ago. The damage or the lack of sleep and the way it affects your body has already been done. So you just want to make sure that you prioritize as many good nights of sleep as you can. Hopefully it's every single one. We know that's probably unrealistic for some people, but I mentioned the schedule. Picking the same time every night and the same time every morning if possible, 7 days a week is extremely important. Your body wants to have a rhythm, usually synchronized with the sun and with the darkness. Also make sure your room is dark, comfortable, quiet. Usually cooler is better for sleep than hotter if that's possible. I know a place like Singapore that sits very close to the equator. One of the things is your temperature is always warm and it's always a little bit muggy. The good thing is I know that air conditioning is an option for some people. But it's hard. It's, the the demands of the modern world mean trying to find all those perfect conditions that existed when we lived in caves and we didn't have phones and we didn't have air conditioning.
Yeah.
It's not always so easy today.
Yeah, well, this is a wake-up call for sure for a lot of us. So before we let you go, Dr. Nunez, for all of us listening who didn't sleep enough last night, what's one practical tip we can try tonight to rest better? I know you gave a lot of tips, put the phone away, be in a dark place, get comfortable. Anything else that comes to mind?
I think the biggest one is disconnect for an hour.
Yeah.
Really wind down. I think that's the one thing that too many of us take for granted. The phone shouldn't be the last thing you see when you go to sleep, and it shouldn't be the first thing you see when you wake up. And that little bit of a ceremony before you go to bed and when you wake up would go so much to promoting healthy sleep, and then also helping you wake up a little bit, less cloudy and more alert every morning.
Well, sleep is not just a personal health issue. It's a powerful lever for preventative care, innovation, and even healthcare policy. Dr. Nunez, it was wonderful chatting with you today, and I'm going to be putting my phone away tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Audrey. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. That was Dr. Carlos Nunez, Chief Medical Officer at ResMed. You're listening to Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.